Ethan adjusted his collar nervously, his fingers fumbling as he tried to make it sit just right. He sat across from Rachel in the cozy nook of the cafe, the gentle hum of background chatter and the occasional clinking of glasses adding to the intimate ambience. The soft lighting cast a warm glow over the room, making it feel like a haven for the conversation he was about to initiate. Rachel, his girlfriend, sat opposite him, leisurely sipping her cappuccino. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of curiosity and affection, reflecting the cozy surroundings. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Ethan began, his voice steady yet tinged with a hint of excitement and nervousness. I have something important to ask. I would like you to meet my father. He's eager to get to know you. Rachel's eyes widened in surprise and delight, her face lighting up with genuine excitement. Really? That's amazing. When and where? Ethan's smile broadened, a wave of relief washing over him at her positive reaction. I've arranged for us to meet him at La Belle Époque, the French restaurant downtown, tomorrow evening. La Belle Époque, Rachel repeated, her voice filled with awe and admiration. Isn't that the most luxurious restaurant in the city? I've heard so much about it. Ethan nodded, his smile growing even wider. Yes, it is. I thought it would be the perfect place for you to meet my father. Rachel's face lit up even more, her excitement almost palpable. Of course, I'd love to. I can't wait to meet him. As soon as Ethan excused himself to take a phone call, Rachel's mind raced with thoughts of the upcoming dinner. She quickly dialed her best friend, Hannah, unable to contain her excitement. Hannah, you won't believe this. Ethan is taking me to La Belle Époque to meet his father, she exclaimed, her voice brimming with excitement. Wow, that's incredible, Hannah replied, her voice filled with genuine enthusiasm. You must be over the moon. I am, Rachel said, her voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. This means his family must be incredibly wealthy. I always knew Ethan had potential, but this just confirms it. Imagine marrying into such affluence. Hannah giggled, sharing in Rachel's excitement. You're so lucky, Rachel. Make sure you impress him and his father. Oh, I will, Rachel said confidently, her mind already racing with plans. I've always dreamed of marrying rich. Who wouldn't? The thought of struggling with someone poor, scraping by day to day is unbearable. That's not the life for me. I want a life of comfort and luxury. Hannah agreed wholeheartedly. Absolutely. You deserve nothing but the best, Rachel. This could be the start of an amazing future for you. Rachel's heart swelled with anticipation. I know, right? This could change everything. I'll make sure to look my best and be on my best behavior. I want to make a great impression on Ethan's father. This is a huge step forward in our relationship. The conversation with Hannah left Rachel feeling even more excited and determined. She envisioned herself impressing Ethan's father, envisioning a future filled with luxury and ease. The thought of being part of a wealthy family was exhilarating, and she felt a surge of confidence. As Ethan returned to the table, Rachel looked at him with renewed determination. She knew that tomorrow's dinner could be a turning point in their relationship, and she was ready to seize the opportunity. She smiled at Ethan, her heart filled with hope and excitement for what the future might hold. Ethan, unaware of the thoughts racing through Rachel's mind, returned her smile, feeling more at ease. The nervous tension he had felt earlier was replaced with a sense of optimism. Tomorrow's dinner at La Belle Époque was set to be a significant milestone, and he felt grateful for Rachel's enthusiastic response. Little did he know, the evening ahead would be a pivotal moment, not just for their relationship, but for Rachel's dreams of a life filled with wealth and luxury. Rachel ended the call, her mind swirling with visions of the glamorous life she hoped to secure. She pictured herself attending opulent parties, draped in designer gowns, living in a grand mansion, and enjoying the luxuries that came with wealth. The prospect of marrying into such affluence was nothing short of exhilarating. As the day of the dinner approached, Rachel's excitement was palpable. Her best friend, Hannah, couldn't contain her curiosity and insisted on coming along. "I want to see this luxurious lifestyle you're about to step into," Hannah said with a mischievous grin. Rachel, eager to impress, agreed without hesitation. When they arrived at La Belle Époque, Ethan was visibly surprised to see Hannah. "I didn't realize you'd bring company," he said, masking his surprise with a polite smile. Hannah insisted. Rachel replied nonchalantly, "I hope it's all right." Ethan nodded, though he felt a slight unease. "Of course, the more the merrier," he said, handing Rachel a large bouquet of vibrant red roses. "These are for you," he added warmly. Rachel's face lit up, her earlier doubts momentarily dispelled. "Thank you, Ethan. They're absolutely beautiful." The trio entered the restaurant, and Rachel was immediately captivated by its splendor. Crystal chandeliers hung majestically from the ceiling, casting a dazzling light over the elegantly set tables adorned with intricate centerpieces. The air was rich with the aroma of gourmet cuisine, heightening the sense of opulence. "This place is incredible," Hannah whispered to Rachel, who nodded, feeling a swell of pride and satisfaction. They were led to their table, and as they settled in, Rachel's curiosity got the better of her. "Ethan, when will your father be joining us?" she asked, her voice tinged with anticipation. Ethan glanced around the room before turning his gaze back to Rachel. "He's already here," he said, a hint of mystery in his tone. Rachel looked around, puzzled. "Where?" she asked, scanning the room for a distinguished figure. Ethan pointed to a corner of the room where a man in a janitor's uniform was diligently sweeping the floor. "There he is," he said calmly. Rachel's face fell, disbelief washing over her features. "You must be joking," she said, her voice shaking with shock. "No, Rachel. That's my father," Ethan replied, his tone steady and sincere. Hannah stifled a laugh, her eyes wide with surprise. "This has to be some kind of prank, right?" Rachel's expression shifted from shock to anger and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me your father is a janitor?" she demanded, her voice rising. Ethan's eyes softened as he looked at her. "Rachel, I didn't think it mattered. My father may be a janitor, but he's the most hardworking and honorable man I know. I wanted you to meet him because he's important to me, not because of his job." Rachel's face turned red with a mix of emotions. She had envisioned a life of luxury, not one connected to such humble roots. "But Ethan, you never mentioned any of this," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan sighed, sensing the tension. "I wanted you to meet him without any preconceived notions. His job doesn't define him or our family." Rachel's dreams of grandeur felt like they were slipping away. She glanced at Hannah, who looked equally stunned but supportive. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to process the unexpected revelation. The man in the janitor's uniform approached their table, a kind smile on his face. "Hello, I'm Mr. Thompson," he said, extending his hand warmly. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Rachel." Rachel hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand, forcing a polite smile. "Nice to meet you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As the evening progressed, Rachel's initial shock began to fade. She listened to Mr. Thompson's stories, realizing the depth of his character and the strength of his work ethic. Despite her initial reaction, she couldn't help but feel a growing respect for the man who had raised Ethan. By the end of the night, Rachel's perspective had shifted slightly. While her dreams of a glamorous life were still intact, she began to understand that true worth wasn't measured by wealth or status, but by integrity and love. Ethan's father, though a janitor, was a testament to those values. As they left La Belle Époque, Rachel held onto Ethan's arm a little tighter, feeling a mixture of uncertainty and newfound respect. She knew the road ahead would be different from what she had imagined, but perhaps richer in ways she had yet to appreciate. Ethan's gaze hardened, his eyes locking onto Rachel with a mixture of hurt and resolve. Does it matter? He's a good man, and that's what's important. Rachel's frustration reached a boiling point. Of course it matters. How could you embarrass me like this? Ethan sighed deeply, his patience wearing thin. Embarrass you? This isn't about you, Rachel. It's about meeting my father. Rachel stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I can't believe you would do this to me. I thought you came from money. I never lied to you, Ethan said quietly, his voice laced with disappointment. You assumed. Hannah, trying to calm the situation, interjected gently. Rachel, maybe you should sit down and give this a chance. Rachel shot her a fierce glare. No, Hannah, I won't sit here and be humiliated. Ethan stood up as well, his voice firm and unwavering. My father works hard and deserves respect. If you can't see past his job, then maybe you're not who I thought you were. Rachel's face flushed with anger and indignation. I don't need this. I deserve better. As she turned to leave, George, who had been overhearing the heated argument from a distance, approached the table. He extended his hand to greet Rachel, a kind smile on his face. Good evening, Rachel. I'm George, Ethan's father. Rachel recoiled, glaring at the hand offered to her. How dare you touch me, you filthy janitor, she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. George's smile faltered, but he remained calm and composed. I'm sorry if I've upset you. Rachel's anger flared even more. Upset? You and your son are nothing but deceitful, lowly scum. Ethan lied to me, pretending to be someone he was not just to get close to me. Pathetic. Ethan stepped forward, his voice steady but strained with emotion. Rachel, that's not true. I never pretended to be anything I'm not. George raised a hand to stop Ethan, a gesture of quiet dignity. Let her speak. Hannah, sensing an opportunity to mend the situation, chimed in softly. Rachel, maybe you should hear Ethan out. There might be more to this than you think. Rachel shot Hannah a withering look. Oh, shut up, Hannah. You're just as bad, always defending these low lives. She turned back to Ethan, her eyes blazing with anger. You think giving me some cheap flowers and a fancy dinner would hide the fact that you're nothing but a poor, pathetic loser? Look at your father, a janitor, and you had the nerve to let me think you were rich. Ethan's heart ached at Rachel's harsh words, but he stood his ground. Rachel, I never intended to deceive you. I wanted you to meet my father because he means the world to me, and I thought you might see the value in that. Rachel's eyes narrowed, her voice a mixture of scorn and bitterness. Value? In a janitor? Spare me your sob story, Ethan. You and your father are beneath me. George, still composed despite the harsh words, looked at his son with pride. Ethan, you don't need to explain yourself to anyone who can't see your worth. Rachel's anger showed no signs of abating. I'm leaving. This was a waste of time, she declared, turning on her heel and storming out of the restaurant. Ethan watched her go, a sense of sadness and relief washing over him. He turned to his father, who gave him a reassuring smile. You did the right thing, son. It's better to know now than later. Hannah, feeling a mix of regret and relief, stepped forward. Ethan, I'm sorry it ended like this. I didn't know Rachel would react that way. Ethan nodded, still processing the events. It's okay, Hannah. I guess this was bound to happen. As the evening progressed, the initial tension slowly dissipated. George shared stories of his life and work, showcasing his wisdom and strength of character. Ethan realized that while he might have lost someone who didn't appreciate him, he still had his father's unwavering support and love. In the end, the dinner at La Belle Bouquet became a turning point, not just for Ethan, but for understanding the true value of integrity and respect. Rachel's departure marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new one, where superficial judgments were replaced with genuine connections and heartfelt appreciation for what truly matters. In a fit of rage, Rachel grabbed the bouquet of roses Ethan had given her earlier and violently threw them to the ground. She stomped on them, crushing the delicate petals under her heel. "This is what I think of your stupid flowers," she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. Ethan's face paled with hurt and disbelief. "Rachel, why are you doing this? What changed? Is it just because my father works as a janitor?" Rachel laughed bitterly, her voice cold and mocking. "Of course. Do you think the son of a janitor has any right to be with someone like me? You should know your place." She stepped closer to Ethan, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "From now on, you will address me as Miss. I don't want anyone to think we're on the same level." George, trying to mediate and ease the tension, spoke gently. "Rachel, please let's not escalate this. We're all just people trying to live our lives with dignity." Rachel whirled on him, her face twisted with disdain. "Shut up. You have no right to speak to me. You're nothing but a dirty janitor. Stay out of this." Ethan's eyes hardened, the pain in his heart giving way to a steely resolve. "That's enough, Rachel. You've made your point." Rachel smirked, her expression cruel. "Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have better things to do than waste my time with you and your pathetic family." She turned on her heel and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving behind a stunned silence. Ethan stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. His father, George, gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, you need to go after her. Explain that you love her." Taking a deep breath, Ethan nodded and rushed out of the restaurant, his heart pounding in his chest. He spotted Rachel and Hannah a short distance away, their voices carrying on the evening breeze. "I can't believe I wasted so much time with Ethan," Rachel was saying, her voice filled with scorn. "At least I found out he's a pauper before it was too late." Hannah laughed, her tone equally dismissive. "You're right. We need to find someone who's rich. Maybe that new club downtown." Ethan approached them, his heart aching but his voice firm. "Rachel, wait. Please, let's talk about this." Rachel turned to face him, her expression one of sheer contempt. "There's nothing to talk about, Ethan. I don't want anything to do with you or your lowly family." Ethan's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but he held his ground. "Rachel, I thought you loved me for who I am, not for what I have. My father's job shouldn't change that." Rachel scoffed, her eyes cold and unfeeling. "I deserve someone who can offer me the life I want, not someone who will drag me down with their poverty. You were never good enough for me." Hannah watched the exchange, her expression a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. "Maybe you should listen to him, Rachel. Love is about more than just money." Rachel shook her head, her decision unwavering. "No, Hannah, I'm done here. Let's go find someone who can give me what I deserve." As Rachel and Hannah walked away, Ethan stood there, feeling a profound sense of loss and heartbreak. He returned to the restaurant, where his father waited, a look of understanding and sadness in his eyes. George embraced his son, offering words of comfort. "Ethan, sometimes people reveal their true selves in difficult situations. It's better to know now than later. You deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you can provide." Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I just thought she was different. I thought she loved me." George held his son tightly. "I know, son, but you'll find someone who truly values you, someone who sees the amazing person you are. Don't let this break your spirit." Ethan took a deep breath, drawing strength from his father's words. "You're right, Dad. I'll find someone who loves me for me. Thank you." As they left La Belle Epoque, Ethan felt a sense of closure. He had lost someone he thought he loved, but he had also gained a deeper understanding of what true love and respect meant. He knew that his journey wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to find happiness in someone who would appreciate the real him. "Definitely," Rachel agreed, her voice dripping with contempt. "It's full of wealthy men. No more time wasters like Ethan." Ethan's stomach churned as their cruel words reached his ears. Steeling himself, he quickened his pace and reached out, grabbing Rachel's arm. "Rachel, wait." Rachel yanked her arm away, her glare icy. "Don't touch me with your filthy hands. Do you even know how much this dress costs?" Ethan's face contorted with hurt. "Rachel, I love you. We've been together for so long. Why are you ending this over something like my father's job?" Rachel scoffed, her voice filled with disdain. "Love? Sure, I loved you partly, but mostly I loved the idea of your money. Without that, what do you have to offer?" Ethan's heart sank. "Is that all I was to you? Just a potential bank account?" "Obviously," Rachel replied sharply. "Why would I settle for anything less? Now get out of my way." In a moment of desperation, Ethan tried to reason with her. "Rachel, please, we can work through this. My love for you is real." Rachel sneered, her voice cold. "Work through what? Your poverty? No thanks. Here, why don't you prove your worth?" With a cruel smile, she kicked over a nearby trash can, spilling its contents onto the sidewalk. "Pick that up," she ordered. "Maybe then I'll reconsider." Ethan stared at the scattered garbage, his heart breaking. For a moment he hesitated, then slowly knelt down and began picking up the trash. Rachel and Hannah watched, their laughter echoing through the night. "Look at him," Rachel mocked. "A pathetic janitor, just like his father." As Ethan gathered the last piece of trash, he looked up at Rachel, hope flickering in his eyes. "Now, can we go back to how things were?" Rachel laughed coldly, her eyes filled with contempt. "Are you dreaming? You think I'd want to be with you after this?" "Here," she said, pulling out a bill from her purse. A tip for the cleanup. She tossed the money at his feet, her laughter ringing in his ears. Ethan's shoulders slumped in humiliation as he picked up the bill. "I guess I was wrong about you, Rachel," he said quietly. "You're damn right you were," Rachel snapped. "Now get lost." Hannah smirked, her tone mocking. "Come on, Rachel, let's go find some real men." Ethan watched them walk away, his heart breaking. George appeared beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "I saw everything, son. I'm sorry you had to go through that." Ethan nodded, fighting back tears. I didn't want to believe she could be so cruel." George sighed, his voice gentle and reassuring. "Sometimes people show their true colors when money is involved. You deserve someone who loves you for who you are, not for what you have." Ethan looked at his father, the weight of realization settling in. "You're right, Dad. I need to find someone better." George smiled warmly, his pride in his son evident. "You will, Ethan. And when you do, it will be worth all of this." Ethan took a deep breath, the pain of the evening still raw but mixed with a newfound sense of clarity. He had seen the true nature of Rachel and understood that love built on superficial desires would never last. As he walked away from the restaurant with his father, he felt a glimmer of hope. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but with his father's unwavering support and the lesson learned from this painful experience, he was determined to find someone who valued him for his true worth. As they walked back to the restaurant, Ethan felt a strange sense of relief. Despite the humiliation and heartbreak, he knew he was better off without Rachel. The experience had been painful, but it had also opened his eyes to the kind of person he truly needed in his life. Later that night, Rachel and Hannah made their way to an upscale bar in the city. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses. Determined to erase the evening's earlier embarrassment, Rachel scanned the room for potential targets. Over there, Hannah whispered, nodding towards a man at the bar. He looked well-dressed, exuding an air of wealth and confidence. Rachel straightened her dress, pushed her shoulders back, and sauntered over with an inviting smile. "Hi there," she greeted, her voice smooth and confident as she leaned slightly forward, ensuring he noticed her plunging neckline. The man turned his gaze, taking in her appearance. "Hello. Can I buy you a drink?" "Sure," Rachel replied, sliding onto the bar stool next to him, crossing her legs slowly to reveal just enough of her thigh. "I'm Rachel, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Rachel." "I'm Miguel." As the evening progressed, Rachel skillfully steered the conversation toward Miguel's profession, all the while maintaining a flirtatious demeanor. She occasionally touched his arm, laughed at his jokes, and played with her hair, her eyes sparkling with interest. "So Miguel," she asked, her voice dropping to a seductive tone, "what do you do?" "I own a chain of restaurants," Miguel said, sipping his drink, clearly captivated by her charm. "One of them is quite well known, La Belle Époque." Rachel's eyes lit up with interest. "Really? That's impressive." "La Belle Époque is such a prestigious place," she purred, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her glass. Miguel smiled modestly. "Thank you. It's been a lot of hard work." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, and by the end of the night, Rachel had successfully charmed Miguel. They left the bar together, her arm linked through his, and spent the night at his luxurious penthouse. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, Rachel lay in bed feeling triumphant. She reached for her phone and called Hannah. "Hannah, guess what? I met this amazing guy last night. He's rich, owns La Belle Époque, and we spent the night together." Hannah's voice crackled with excitement over the phone. "No way. That's incredible, Rachel. You move fast." Rachel laughed. "I know, right? And I have the perfect idea to rub it in Ethan's face. Let's go to La Belle Époque for dinner tonight. I'll show him how quickly I can find someone better." Hannah chuckled. "That sounds perfect. It'll be fun to see his reaction." Rachel ended the call and dialed Miguel. He answered on the second ring. "Good morning, Rachel." "Good morning, Miguel. I was thinking, how about we have dinner at La Belle Époque tonight? I'd love to see your restaurant." There was a brief hesitation on the other end of the line. "I have a meeting this evening that might run late, but you can go ahead. I'll join you as soon as I can." Rachel smiled. "That's fine. I understand. I'll see you there." After hanging up, she called Hannah again to confirm their plans. "Hannah, it's all set. We're having dinner at La Belle Époque tonight." "Great. I can't wait to see Ethan's face when he sees you with someone new," Hannah said, her voice brimming with anticipation. The evening arrived quickly. Rachel and Hannah dressed to the nines, making their way to La Belle Époque. As they entered the restaurant, Rachel's eyes scanned the room, hoping to spot Ethan or his father. The maitre d' showed them to their table, and Rachel settled in, feeling a sense of satisfaction. "This is perfect," she whispered to Hannah. "Ethan will see that I've moved on to someone better." Meanwhile, back at home, Ethan sat with his father, still processing the events of the previous night. "Dad, I'm glad I know the truth now. It hurts, but it's better this way." George nodded, his eyes full of compassion. "Son, you deserve someone who appreciates you for who you are, not for what they think you have. Rachel showed her true colors, and you need someone genuine in your life." Ethan sighed, "You're right, Dad. It's just hard to accept." George placed a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Healing takes time, but you'll get there. Just focus on being the best version of yourself, and the right person will come along." As Rachel and Hannah enjoyed their meal, laughing and toasting to new beginnings, Ethan found solace in his father's words. The lesson had been painful, but it was a necessary step towards a brighter future. He realized that the love he sought could only come from someone who valued him for his true self, not for superficial reasons. Rachel's triumph that night was fleeting, built on the shaky ground of vanity and materialism. Ethan's journey, though marred by heartache, set him on a path toward genuine, lasting happiness. As he looked towards the future, he knew that the love he would find would be worth all the pain and lessons learned along the way. Hannah grinned. "Absolutely, and Miguel sounds like a catch." As they sipped their drinks and chatted, a young waitress approached their table with the menu. She froze for a moment as she recognized Rachel. Gathering her courage, she spoke up. "Hi, Rachel. It's been a while." Rachel looked up, her face twisting with disdain. "Do I know you?" The waitress hesitated, then nodded. "I'm Emily, Ethan's sister. I recognized you from a photo he has of the two of you together." Rachel's eyes flashed with irritation. "Oh, really?" she said coldly. "Well, that's ancient history now." Emily, undeterred, pulled out her phone to show Rachel the photo. "See? This is you and my brother." Rachel snatched the phone out of Emily's hand and, without a second thought, flung it across the room. The phone clattered to the floor, its screen cracking. "I told you I don't care about Ethan. We broke up." Emily's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. She opened her mouth to retort, but before she could speak, George appeared beside her. He placed a calming hand on her shoulder. "Emily, that's enough." Rachel smirked, feeling a surge of triumph. "You should teach your daughter how to respect customers." George looked at Rachel, his expression unreadable. "My apologies for any inconvenience," he said calmly. "Emily, go help another table." Emily shot Rachel a furious glance before walking away, her eyes welling up with tears. George turned his attention back to Rachel. "Is there anything else you need, Miss Rachel?" Rachel leaned back in her chair, her demeanor haughty. "Just make sure our drinks are perfect. And remember, my new boyfriend owns this place. I can have you both fired if you don't do your jobs properly." George raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Your boyfriend owns La Belle Époque?" "That's right," Rachel replied smugly. "Miguel. He told me all about it." George's eyes widened slightly, but he maintained his composure. "I see. I'll make sure everything goes smoothly for you tonight." He turned to leave, but Rachel wasn't done. And another thing she called out, her voice loud and high. "Make sure that fat little waitress knows her place. She's lucky to even have a job here." George's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll take care of it." As he walked back to the bar, Emily approached him, her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, are you okay?" George sighed, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the confrontation. "I'm fine, Emily. Just keep doing your job. Don't let her get to you." Emily nodded, but her heart ached. She returned to the floor, her mind swirling with a mix of anger and humiliation. George watched her go, his own heart heavy with worry and frustration. Meanwhile, back at the table, Rachel and Hannah continued their evening, oblivious to the chaos they had caused. "This place is even better than I imagined," Hannah said, taking a sip of her drink. "And you handled that waitress perfectly." Rachel smiled, feeling a sense of power and satisfaction. "Of course, I know how to get what I want." As the night went on, Rachel couldn't help but glance around the restaurant, hoping to see Ethan. She wanted him to witness her new life, to see that she had moved on to someone better. Her eyes scanned the room, but there was no sign of him. Just as Rachel was beginning to relax, the door opened, and in walked Ethan, his eyes immediately locking onto Rachel. He took a deep breath and approached their table, his expression calm but determined. "Rachel, we need to talk." Rachel's smirk returned. "What is there to talk about, Ethan? We're done." Ethan's gaze didn't waver. "I need to tell you something. Your new boyfriend, Miguel, he's not who you think he is." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Ethan glanced around to ensure no one was listening. "Miguel doesn't own this restaurant. My father does. Miguel is just a manager here." Rachel's face flushed with anger and disbelief. "You're lying." Ethan shook his head. "I wish I were. But it's the truth. My father built this place from the ground up. Miguel is just an employee." Hannah looked shocked, her eyes darting between Ethan and Rachel. "Is that true?" Ethan nodded. "Yes. And Rachel, if you can't see the value in people beyond their bank accounts, then you're not the person I thought you were." Rachel's hands trembled with rage. "I don't believe you. You're just trying to make me feel bad." Ethan sighed, realizing that there was no getting through to her. "Believe what you want, Rachel. But the truth is, you let a good thing go because of your misconceptions." With that, Ethan turned and walked away, leaving Rachel and Hannah in stunned silence. The weight of his words hung in the air, a stark reminder of the consequences of their actions. George watched his son from across the room, pride swelling in his chest. Ethan had handled the situation with dignity and grace, proving that he was truly a man of character. Rachel, on the other hand, sat in silence, her mind racing with thoughts of what she had lost. She had traded genuine love for a fleeting sense of power and wealth, and now she was left with nothing but regret. As the evening drew to a close, Rachel and Hannah left the restaurant, their laughter hollow and forced. The triumph Rachel had felt earlier had vanished, replaced by a gnawing emptiness. Ethan and his father sat together, reflecting on the night's events. "Dad, thank you for everything," Ethan said quietly. "I'm glad I saw the truth before it was too late." George smiled warmly. "I'm proud of you, son. You handled yourself with honor. And remember, the right person will come along when you least expect it." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of peace. He knew that his journey wasn't over, but he was ready to face whatever came next, with his father's wisdom and support guiding him every step of the way. Back at their cozy table, Rachel and Hannah resumed their lively conversation, their laughter and animated voices a striking contrast to the earlier tension that had hung heavily in the air. Rachel experienced a twisted sense of gratification, convinced she had scored another minor victory in the ongoing battle of wits. As the evening progressed, the restaurant buzzed with more patrons, the hum of conversation growing louder and more vibrant. But for Rachel, none of it held any significance. Her focus was unwavering. She was determined to prove to everyone, especially Ethan, that she had moved on to something far superior. Meanwhile, George, the attentive waiter, kept a vigilant eye on Rachel and Hannah, ensuring their service was impeccable despite the earlier confrontation. He understood the importance of maintaining professionalism, no matter how challenging the circumstances. The restaurant's ambience, with its warm lighting and soft music, seemed to mock Rachel's inner turmoil. As the night dragged on, Rachel's patience began to fray. She glanced at her phone repeatedly, noting with growing irritation that Miguel's meeting must be running significantly late. He should be here any minute, she reassured Hannah, though a tinge of doubt and anxiety colored her words. The minutes ticked by slowly, each one amplifying her frustration. Just then, the restaurant door swung open, and Rachel's heart raced with anticipation. She turned, fully expecting to see Miguel's familiar face, but instead, it was merely a group of business people arriving for dinner. Rachel forced a smile, hiding her deep disappointment and the sinking feeling in her chest. Minutes stretched into an hour, and still, there was no sign of Miguel. Rachel's annoyance intensified, her mind swirling with a mix of anger and hurt. She could feel the eyes of other patrons on her, imagining their silent judgments and whispers. Where could he be? She murmured under her breath, her fingers tapping restlessly on the table in a rhythmic display of impatience. The noise of the bustling restaurant seemed to fade into the background as her thoughts consumed her. Hannah, noticing Rachel's mounting frustration and the way her shoulders tensed, tried to comfort her. "He'll be here soon. Maybe his meeting is just running longer than expected," she offered, her voice gentle and reassuring. But Rachel's mind was a whirlwind of worry and insecurity. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that perhaps Miguel had forgotten about her or deemed the meeting more important than their plans. The evening seemed to stretch endlessly, each second adding to Rachel's growing sense of unease. The restaurant, once a backdrop for laughter and camaraderie, now felt suffocating. Rachel's thoughts drifted back to Ethan, and a fresh wave of determination washed over her. She had to prove she was better off, that she had moved on to a life filled with better prospects and greater happiness. As Rachel's irritation continued to grow, she couldn't help but replay every moment of the evening in her mind. The way Ethan had looked at her, the whispered conversations of the diners around her, the soft clink of glasses and cutlery that seemed to punctuate her every anxious thought. She felt trapped in a loop of her own making, a cycle of expectation and disappointment that was hard to break. George, ever the professional, returned to their table with a warm smile, oblivious to the storm brewing within Rachel. "Is there anything else I can get for you ladies?" he asked, his tone polite and accommodating. Rachel shook her head, forcing another smile, while Hannah thanked him for his attentiveness. The exchange was brief, but it served as a reminder of the facade Rachel was maintaining. Time continued to crawl, and Rachel's thoughts became more frantic. What if something had happened to Miguel? What if he had decided not to come? Each scenario played out in her mind, each one more distressing than the last. The lively chatter of the restaurant seemed to mock her, a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the restaurant door opened once more. Rachel turned with a mix of hope and dread, her heart pounding in her chest. This time it was Miguel. Relief flooded through her, mingling with the lingering frustration and disappointment of the evening. She forced herself to relax, to let go of the tension that had built up inside her. Miguel approached their table with an apologetic smile, explaining how his meeting had run late. Rachel listened, trying to mask the lingering resentment. "I'm just glad you're here," she said, her voice betraying a hint of the emotional roller coaster she had been on. As the evening finally settled into a semblance of normalcy, Rachel reflected on the night's events. She realized that her need to prove herself, to show Ethan and everyone else that she had moved on, had almost overshadowed the very reason she was there to enjoy the company of friends and loved ones. She vowed to let go of the unnecessary pressures and focus on what truly mattered. The restaurant's ambience, which had once felt mocking, now seemed more inviting as Rachel allowed herself to relax. The night had been a test of patience and resilience, but it had also been a reminder of the importance of presence over perception. Rachel smiled, genuinely this time, as she raised her glass to Miguel and Hannah, grateful for their companionship and the lessons learned. At that precise moment, Emily approached the table, carefully balancing a tray of drinks with hands that appeared steady, though her eyes betrayed her nervousness. "Here are your drinks," she murmured, placing each glass with deliberate care on the table. Rachel exchanged a knowing glance with Hannah before fixing her gaze on Emily. "Thank you," she said with a sweetness that barely masked the danger in her tone. As Emily turned to walk away, Rachel's voice sliced through the air, halting her abruptly. "Wait," she commanded, her voice taking on a sudden, harsh edge. I want to apologize for earlier. Emily turned back, her face a portrait of surprise and caution. Apologize, she echoed, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Yes, Rachel affirmed, standing up and stepping closer to Emily, closing the distance between them. I was rude and I'm sorry. Can you forgive me? Emily blinked, clearly taken aback by the unexpected apology. I guess so, she stammered. Great, Rachel replied, a saccharine smile spreading across her face. Here, let me give you a hug. Before Emily could react, Rachel seized the tray of drinks and, with a swift, vicious motion, tipped them over Emily's head. The icy liquid cascaded down, drenching her uniform and making her gasp in shock. The restaurant fell into a stunned silence as patrons turned to witness the unfolding drama. Emily stood there, dripping and humiliated, her eyes wide with disbelief and hurt. Hannah erupted into laughter, and Rachel joined in, her laugh loud and cruel. Oh, look at you. You're a mess, Rachel taunted, her voice dripping with malice. George, who had been observing from a distance, rushed over, his face a mask of concern and anger. What is going on here? He demanded, his voice tight with fury. Rachel smirked, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye. Just teaching your daughter a lesson, she said dismissively. George's face flushed red with rage. This is unacceptable. You can't treat people like this, he asserted, his voice trembling with anger. Rachel crossed her arms defiantly. I can do whatever I want, and if you don't like it, maybe you should find another job. Remember, my boyfriend owns this place, she retorted arrogantly. George took a deep breath, struggling to maintain his composure. Emily, go get cleaned up. I'll handle this, he instructed gently. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face as she hurried away, her humiliation palpable. George turned back to Rachel, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. You need to leave, he stated firmly. Rachel raised an eyebrow, feigning innocence. Leave? Why should I? We're paying customers, she said, her tone mocking. George's voice was unwavering. Not anymore. Your behavior is unacceptable, and you are no longer welcome here, he declared. Rachel's eyes narrowed dangerously. You think you can kick me out? You're just a dirty waiter. You have no right, she sneered. George stood his ground, his voice steady and resolute. I am the manager here, and I have every right to remove anyone who disrupts the peace and mistreats my staff, he replied calmly. Just then, the door to the restaurant swung open, and Miguel walked in. Rachel's expression shifted instantly, her eyes lighting up as if she had found a lifeline. Miguel, she exclaimed, rushing over to him and wrapping her arms around his neck. Miguel looked confused but hugged her back. Rachel, what's going on here? He asked, his voice filled with concern. George remained calm, addressing Miguel directly. Good evening, Mr. Miguel. There's been an incident with your girlfriend, he began. Rachel interrupted, her voice sweet and persuasive. Miguel, this man is being incredibly rude. He's trying to kick us out for no reason, she lied smoothly. George stood there, watching the scene unfold with a calm expression. Miguel's eyes widened when he saw George, and he immediately stepped forward, his demeanor respectful. Mr. George, he greeted, his voice filled with deference. Rachel's eyes widened in shock. Why are you being so formal with him, Miguel? He's just a waiter, she said, her voice laced with confusion. Miguel shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. No, Rachel. George is the owner of La Belle Époque, he revealed. Rachel's face turned pale. What? But you told me you own this place, she said, her voice trembling. Miguel chuckled softly. I'm the manager, Rachel. George is my boss, he explained. George remained calm, addressing Miguel. Thank you, Miguel. There's been a misunderstanding, but it's under control now, he assured, his voice steady and authoritative. Rachel stood there, her mind reeling with the revelation. She had thought she could manipulate the situation to her advantage, but now she found herself at the mercy of the very person she had tried to humiliate. The patrons in the restaurant watched with bated breath, the tension in the air palpable. Emily, now cleaned up and standing at a distance, observed the scene with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had endured a humiliating ordeal, but George's firm stance gave her a sense of vindication. As George and Miguel discussed the situation, Rachel's bravado began to crumble. She realized that her actions had consequences, and she was now facing the repercussions of her cruelty. The atmosphere in the restaurant shifted as the patrons, once silent observers, began to murmur among themselves, their disapproval evident. Rachel's defiance gave way to embarrassment, and she struggled to maintain her composure. Miguel turned to Rachel, his expression stern. "Rachel, we need to leave." "Now," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Rachel hesitated, but the look in Miguel's eyes told her that resistance was futile. She glanced around the restaurant, taking in the disapproving stares and whispers. Her arrogance had cost her dearly, and she had no choice but to accept the consequences. As they walked towards the exit, George watched them go, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and resolve. He had stood up for his staff and upheld the dignity of his establishment. Emily approached him, her eyes still red from crying but filled with gratitude. "Thank you, George," she whispered, her voice trembling. George placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You don't deserve to be treated like that." "No one does," he replied gently. The patrons began to return to their meals, the tension in the air slowly dissipating. Emily felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. She knew that she had a strong support system in George and the rest of the staff at La Belle Époque. The ordeal had been humiliating, but it had also revealed the strength of the bonds that held their small community together. Rachel and Miguel stepped out into the night, the door closing behind them with a finality that echoed the end of Rachel's reign of terror. As they walked away, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling of shame and regret. She had lost more than just a confrontation. She had lost respect, dignity, and the trust of those around her. Inside the restaurant, George and Emily shared a quiet moment of solidarity. The night's events had tested their resolve, but they had emerged stronger. The restaurant, once again filled with the hum of conversation and clinking of cutlery, stood as a testament to their resilience and unwavering commitment to treating everyone with kindness and respect. At that precise moment, Ethan strode into the restaurant, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his demeanor exuding determination. He moved swiftly toward the group, his expression set with resolve. "Dad, you called about an issue with Rachel causing trouble here." "I came as soon as I could," he said, his voice carrying a sense of urgency. George nodded, placing a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Yes, son. Rachel has been causing a disturbance and treating our staff poorly. I had to ask her to leave." Ethan turned to Rachel, disappointment evident in his eyes. "Rachel, why would you do this?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of confusion and sadness. Rachel's face contorted with desperation. "Ethan, they were all against me. They treated me horribly. You have to believe me," she pleaded, her voice trembling. George sighed, shaking his head. "That's not true, Rachel. You poured drinks over my daughter and insulted her in front of everyone. You disrespected our staff and our customers." Rachel looked at Miguel, her eyes filled with pleading desperation. "Miguel, please, you have to help me." "They're lying," she insisted, her voice growing shrill. Miguel gently pushed her hand away. "Rachel, you need to take responsibility for your actions. I can't help you if you keep denying what you've done," he said firmly, his tone laced with disappointment. Rachel's desperation morphed into anger. "You're all against me. You set me up," she screamed, her eyes blazing with fury. Ethan took a step forward, his voice firm. "Rachel, enough. You need to leave. This behavior is unacceptable," he commanded. Rachel glared at him, her anger boiling over. "You can't do this to me," she shouted. Ethan stood his ground, his expression unwavering. "Yes, I can, and I am," he replied, his voice steady. Desperation flickered across Rachel's face as she glanced around, seeing the disapproving looks from the other patrons. She realized she was losing control. She turned back to Ethan, her tone suddenly softening, her voice almost a whisper. "Ethan, please, let's talk about this." "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to get so out of hand," she said, trying to regain his sympathy. Ethan's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing. "You're sorry? After everything you just did? You humiliated my sister and disrespected my father." He retorted, his voice filled with disbelief. Rachel took a step closer, reaching out to touch his arm, her voice trembling with emotion. I know I was wrong. I love you, Ethan. I do. Please, let's not end things like this," she begged. Ethan pulled his arm away, his expression one of disbelief and hurt. "Love? Do you call this love? You only care about money, Rachel. That's all you've ever cared about," he said bitterly. Rachel shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "No, Ethan, that's not true. I love you for you, not just for what you have," she insisted, her voice breaking. Ethan sighed, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his emotions. "If that were true, you wouldn't have treated my family the way you did. You wouldn't have caused this scene just because you thought you were entitled to something," he said, his voice filled with sadness. Rachel glanced around desperately. "Wait, so your family owns this restaurant?" she asked, trying to piece together the situation. Ethan nodded. "Yes, we do," he confirmed. Rachel's demeanor changed instantly, adopting a pleading look. "Ethan, you have to understand. I didn't mean those things. I was just trying to test you, to see if you truly loved me," she lied, her voice desperate. Ethan laughed bitterly. "Test me? Do you think you can walk into my family's life, treat them like garbage, and then expect to be welcomed with open arms? You're delusional," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Rachel tried to grab his hand again, but he stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Ethan, please give me another chance. I promise I can change. I'll do better. I'll make it up to you," she begged, her voice filled with desperation. Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with sadness and resignation. "No, Rachel, I can't do this anymore. I can't be with someone who only values me for my money," he said, his voice firm. Rachel's tears started to fall as she realized she was losing him. "Ethan, please. I beg you, don't leave me," she sobbed, her voice filled with despair. Ethan shook his head, the finality of his decision clear in his eyes. "It's over, Rachel. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it's not with me," he said, his voice resolute. Rachel's legs gave way, and she sank to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. George, who had been watching the exchange quietly, stepped forward and placed a comforting hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Let's go, son," he said softly. Ethan nodded, turning his back on Rachel, who was still on the floor, pleading. As he walked away, the weight of his decision settled on him, but he knew it was the right thing to do. The restaurant began to return to normal, the tension slowly dissipating. Emily, now cleaned up and standing at a distance, watched with a mixture of relief and admiration for her brother and father. She felt a renewed sense of hope and determination, knowing that her family stood by her. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing. Ethan and George walked side by side, the bond between them strengthened by the evening's events. They knew that they could face any challenge together, as long as they had each other's support. Rachel remained on the floor of the restaurant, her sobs echoing in the now quiet room. She had lost more than just a confrontation. She had lost respect, dignity, and the love of the man she had claimed to care for. The realization of her actions and their consequences weighed heavily on her, but there was no turning back. Inside, The patrons resumed their conversations, the incident slowly fading into a mere memory. Emily approached George and Ethan, a smile of gratitude on her face. "Thank you both. I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. George smiled warmly at his daughter. "We're family, Emily. We take care of each other," he said, his voice filled with pride. Ethan nodded in agreement, placing an arm around Emily's shoulders. "Always," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. As they stood together, the strength of their family bond was evident. They had faced a difficult situation and emerged stronger, united by their love and mutual respect. The restaurant, now filled with the hum of conversation and laughter, stood as a testament to their resilience and unwavering commitment to one another. Rachel's actions had brought them closer, and they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The night had tested their resolve, but it had also reaffirmed their dedication to treating everyone with kindness and respect. As the evening drew to a close, the family walked out of the restaurant together, ready to face whatever the future held. They knew that as long as they had each other, they could overcome any obstacle and continue to build a life filled with love, respect, and unwavering support. Outside the restaurant, Ethan took a deep breath, the cool night air filling his lungs and clearing his mind. George stood beside him, a pillar of strength and comfort. "You did the right thing," George said softly. Ethan nodded slowly, a heavy weight pressing on his chest. "I know, Dad. It hurts." George gave his son a reassuring pat on the back. "I know it does, but you need someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have." Inside, Rachel slowly stood up, wiping away her tears with trembling hands. She looked around, her eyes meeting the pitying and judgmental gazes of the other diners. Humiliated and overwhelmed with regret, she grabbed her purse and stumbled towards the exit. Her mind raced with sorrow and the realization of her actions. As she stepped outside, she saw Ethan and George talking quietly under the streetlights. For a moment, she considered running to Ethan, begging for one more chance, but something held her back. She realized that she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. With a final heart-wrenching sob, she turned and walked away into the night, her footsteps echoing the finality of her departure. Ethan watched her go, feeling a complicated mix of sadness and relief. "I thought she loved me, Dad," he murmured, his voice tinged with disbelief. George nodded, understanding the pain in his son's heart. "Sometimes we see what we want to see, but now you know the truth, and you can move forward," Ethan sighed, lifting his gaze to the starlit sky. "I guess so. It just feels like a part of me is missing." George smiled gently, his eyes filled with paternal wisdom. "That part will heal, son, and when it does, you'll be stronger for it." The two men stood there for a moment, the cool night air wrapping around them like a comforting blanket. Inside the restaurant, life continued with its usual hum of activity, but for Ethan, the world felt quieter and more focused. He had faced a painful truth and emerged on the other side, ready to seek genuine love. As they walked to their car, Ethan felt a sense of peace beginning to settle over him. The road ahead might be uncertain, but he knew he had his family by his side, and that was enough for now. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around until the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed the story about Ethan, Rachel, and the dramatic showdown at La Belle Époque. Let's delve into some key takeaways from this tale, especially regarding Rachel's character. Rachel's behavior highlights the pitfalls of valuing money over people and the dangers of looking down on others based on their financial status. She was so focused on the wealth and status she believed Ethan had that she missed who he truly was. Her actions, driven by greed and a desire for luxury, ultimately led to her downfall. What struck me most was how she treated those she perceived as beneath her, like Emily and George. Her disdain for people she deemed less wealthy was toxic and harmful. This attitude isolated her and revealed her true colors when faced with adversity. Ethan's decision to walk away from Rachel was powerful. It showed that love and relationships built on superficial desires crumble. He realized that true love is about valuing a person for who they are, not what they have. Thank you for joining us on this insightful journey through various topics and experiences. We hope you found valuable insights and learned something new along the way. We'd love to hear from you. What is one key takeaway you've gained from this video that you plan to implement in your life? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring content. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.